The program is really the backbone of what we do at ValueEd, directed very specifically at teachers and educators, and therefore given the flavor of what I would call the essential ingredient in what I believe to be the future of education, which is leadership, i.e., when educators and teachers no longer become the disseminators of information only, but become leaders in terms of how they're approaching the students. So what we talk about very, the elements of leadership here are about inspiring, which I think is going to be a critical component and a skill that's going to be required to sustain particularly young people moving forward, but also the importance of this for themselves. So this program is designed so that educators can take some time off with regards to what they're familiar with in the classroom and really focus on themselves. It's personal excellence and a personal performance program designed to elevate self-mastery. And it's also designed to promote within the teacher this element of leadership for themselves and leadership obviously to go and guide whoever they're guiding at the time. So you'll hear me talk a lot about inspiring of future leaders, educators, elevating personal excellence and performance. And I talk about it from the context that, when I used to go and speak to students, I was asked quite predominantly, particularly also from Principal Ntuli, to speak to the teachers, and therefore this program has come from that to enhance them so that they're able to deliver better, not only for the students, but for themselves. Again, we do it over Zoom. It's interactive. Before I used to go to the schools. We'll still do that when we pick up a bit of momentum with the schools. We'll still be able to have some physical contact, but predominantly it's going to be an online support process whereby anyone who's an educator in organizations, whether it's learnership schools, colleges, universities, etc., is free to come onto the program because I think it'll appeal to them. So what we did, and I got a lot of support here from the Principal Ntuli, is to look at what are the key attributes that we need to start supporting educators in terms of building them from a leadership capacity. So the ones that we started thinking about were things like preparation, and I'll talk a little bit high level around what we offer in this to the educators. In some of these, not all of them, although because of the purposes of time, I'll give you a flavor of what we're offering. So preparation is, I think, an essential skill required for educators, but it's also an essential skill required in life in general. Communication, choice, teamwork, dream the plan, listening skills, plan the dream. So dream the plan and plan the dream will go hand in hand. Digital skills, defining your success, keep on keeping on, negotiating skills, and time management. So those are the kind of core elements that we'll offer in the program. And so you can see there are 12 programs. We're going to offer one of these programs per month. So we'd like this to run over a course of a year. And the main reason we're doing that is obviously because of the time elements that are linked to educators with regards to availability. So if we start looking holistically at what are the future skills for educators and teachers, we look at what we then start incorporating soft skills. So these are additional and will be embedded in some of those core elements that I've spoken about now. And these look at things like student motivation. Again, understanding that some of these, depending on the level of experience you may have these already, but certainly at the onset of anybody who's going into this kind of profession, they need to start developing these soft skills. Presentation skills, right? Constructive feedback skills, problem-solving skills, group dynamics, which I also like to call this element of teamwork, conflict resolution, leading with confidence, monitoring, coaching, and living with integrity. And obviously living with integrity is a critical one, because, you know, some of the unfortunate reports that come out with teachers and relationships that they have with students, etc., etc., etc. So the assumption that these skills fall from heaven are not true. They are skills, and therefore, like any skill, you've got to develop them. You've got to understand the kind of mitigations you need to put into place, or the kind of learnings that you need to put into place. What I haven't added here, which I think I need to add just for future reference, thinking what I talked about yesterday in work readiness, are skills related to values. So those skills can be incorporated also into the program to define exactly what's going to happen. So what will the program look like? So the program, the core ones, those 12 that I put out at first, we will have those once a month. And the intention also is once a month is to also have guest speakers. So what we would want to do, because ultimately this platform designed for educators is supposed to develop them from their own capacity, but also because it's a platform and we're online, we would like to develop what we call a networking community. So what guest speakers would be able to do, as a matter of fact, just my chief, not too long ago, probably about 3 weeks ago, I listened to a professor from Manchester University who was talking about branding and rebranding yourself from the construct of storytelling. It was fascinating. He's based out in the UK, and he managed to do this amazing podcast. I mean, Zoom with us and a bunch of leaders, and how he constructed this thing about the future of having to present yourself in a particular manner was really fascinating, because he talked about it from the context of storytelling, and that life, throughout our entire life, all we're doing is writing a story. So when you think about how, when you relate to your kids and you go back, you're usually telling a story about how they were born, or how you met, you know, your spouse, or how you succeeded here. So he says that if you can understand that in retrospect, you're looking at yourself from a story point of view, then you need to start considering intentionality, how you write your story of the future. And it was a good way in terms of segmenting this thing of how are people going to write their story post-COVID. And it's somebody I would really like, probably as one of the first guests to get on board, to come and do that presentation, so that people understand that despite what you're doing in life, you're writing your story, and 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, you're going to look back retrospectively and tell a story. So what will that story be? So that's the guest speaker element. And then once a month, we're also going to give everybody who's on this program access to what we call the Leadership Masterclass. As a matter of fact, the first Leadership Masterclass we're doing is this Friday. And the Leadership Masterclass is going to form the center of a lot of our other different programs which people are going to be able to enter. The whole idea of this class is to give, particularly now educators, a macro view of what's going on in South Africa. So what we will or the guests we'll invite on this are what I call sector leaders, so people within a financial services sector, within the aviation sector, whatever the case may be, or very specific functional expertise. So people who are CFOs, or people who are CEOs, or whatever the case may be, and they will come and give a macro view. And I think the context of that is important, because not only does it benefit the actual educator themselves, because they need to understand that they are teaching in a macro environment. So therefore, everything that they say and how they say it has to be contextualized to that. But also just from a personal point of view, being able to understand the dynamics of what's going on from the expertise of those individuals. And then also once a month, we'll have mogul classes. Now, we already had our last mogul class, and people who come onto this program will have access to these mogul class. The last one was so good, we've actually turned it into a program. So my chief, what we did the last time was we had I think last week, Saturday, we had a mogul class on personal branding and social media. And the questions that came up from that were quite diverse and quite interesting. about how people, this is about showing up to work. It's a real strong component of work readiness, because who you are and how you show up is essential to how you present yourself and how other people perceive you. And in the educator space, I always make this point that as much as I love my parents very much and they were very influential in my life, the biggest influences in my life were educators and teachers. And all my thought processes in terms of success and failure at my early age came predominantly from educators and teachers. So whether you're in an environment at home where you're not necessarily getting that stimuli about your capability to succeed, when you go into the school environment and you meet teachers and educators who have confidence, belief, and aspirations for you, it makes a massive difference to the impact that may have. As a matter of fact, so impactful is that I think if it was vice versa, it wouldn't have any impact. In other words, if you go home and you are consistently validated or consistently told you can make it and consistently told that you're good, and then you go and spend 8 hours at school where your teachers are telling you you're not going to make it, you're useless, and you're worse than everybody else, I think the detrimental impact of that is greater than the positive impact at home. So it goes to show that how an educator shows up at work, I mean, at school, at work, is critical to the implications it has on the students. And I don't know if you'd agree with me on that point. So, and then the other things that will come in the program are networking opportunities, as I said, thought leadership. So we will start putting up quite a lot of content around, stuff that I think educators should watch or read or see. I mean, I'm watching a lot of TED Talks around the subject of education and schooling, and it's fascinating. And I know sometimes because of time factors, you don't have the ability to sift through all this stuff. We will put this up so that you're able to just click on it and get it. Advisory updates, particularly what we would like to do even within the guest speaking element, is for heads of departments, for principals, etc., to just get indications of what are the new trends, advice, information, management of things like people management, HR, finance, and all those kind of things. And then career job. Career job is, where to next? If I come in and choose education as my career, where does it take me? What can I do? What does the world open up to me to stay in the space of being an educator, but yet progress in terms of what my aspirations are? So that's what the program overview looks like. And what I'm going to do now is whiz very quickly through the program itself. So everybody else has seen it. But I'm going to whiz through the program to give you some of the highlights of the ideas that we would be putting into place with regards to this program for educators, so that they can get a sense of their own personal growth, self-mastery, personal excellence, and performance. And I'm not going to touch on all those 12 elements. I'm just going to touch on a few. The first one that I'll touch to, don't be raised your hand. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make you aware that Sis Jabu did come through eventually.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, Sis Jabu, welcome. I don't know how much you've caught, how much you've missed. But welcome.
For the past 10 minutes, she's been with us. For the
past fantastic, fantastic. Then she's caught quite a bit then. So, and then we'll chat a little bit.
Thank you.
This. Thanks for joining. So the program highlights, I'm going to give you some of the big, elements of the program. And again, I'm coming from the context of leadership. Now, in my personal opinion, a leader in a corporate environment has very similar requirements as an educator. And that is to lead, to motivate, to get the best out of individuals, to ensure that they improve, to set milestones for them that they have to achieve, and to make sure that overall they have some kind of personal satisfaction in terms of what they're achieving, but also to deliver something against a wider requirement. And within the educator framework, a lot of the students that are being educated have a responsibility to deliver towards a wider framework. And I think even though there is very regulated and mandated compliance requirements with regards to the delivery of what teachers have to do, there also has to be a nuance to that in terms of how that is delivered and what it is from an intentionality point of view is presented. So unless these educators have this within themselves, defined within themselves as leaders, then it will be difficult to pass that. And one key one for me is this construct of preparation. Preparation being a very essential component in terms of understanding this whole process of getting the results that you're requiring. And I suppose no more required than in leadership from a educator's point of view, and in any leader for that matter, is this true understanding of what does preparation require. So in the crisis that we're going through right now, the idea that you are constantly having to be prepared for a new change of direction, a new position, a new situation, a new occurrence is standard in life. And if you are not adept to that, then it becomes difficult. So the thing that we look at here is a couple of things. The one is this element that I know, at least Principal Ntuli has heard 1,000 times in these things, as well as you, Ntombi, is this concept of you reap what you sow. And the reason why I go on about this so much is because it's been the pinnacle part of my construct with regards to leadership. If I appreciate that you reap what you sow, and everybody who knows that context and knows that phrase will express it in terms of their understanding from their perspective, in a leadership capacity, it's important. What I put in is what I get out. It's as simple as that from an overall perspective. But what I put in is important. So therefore, from a leadership construct, what you put in as an educator to others, but more importantly, what you put in to yourself. What is it that you are creating and preparing for yourself from a personal excellence and a self-mastery point of view that you hope to see an outcome later on? The other thing here that applies to everybody, particularly leaders, is that you reap what you sow. I mean, we're having this debate with CEOs about the impact of their results versus who they're leading. And the question I always ask is, well, the results you get are a reflection of how you're leading. So if you've got good results, it's something that is in correlation with how you're performing. So it's always the question of what are you doing? You reap what you sow. You CEO, what are you doing? You educator, what are you doing in order to get the kind of results that you're looking for? So the you is paramount. It's paramount for leaders to understand that the outcomes that we reflect are a consequence of what we put in. And within the construct of preparation, one needs to understand that the mindset very easily goes to this right-hand side picture. It's very easy for us to paint the picture of the outcome that we're looking for. But the left-hand side is what preparation is about. The left-hand side is how is it that you're going about the process of actually getting to the right-hand side. I always say that one must remember the difference between preparation and planning. Right? Planning is if you are deciding to create a summer body, as I use an example, is, all the elements around, this is what I want to lose weight, etc., etc., etc. I want to get into the construct of getting fitter. I want to have a better body, etc. But when you start asking the questions of when and how, that's the preparation phase. It's the horrible stuff that comes before the outcome that you're looking for. So the key elements in leadership, I think, is that if you don't understand the principle of preparation and you don't understand this thing of what you put in and get out, then you miss the whole element. The other example I gave there was communication, which is another module. Now, communication here is, for me, critical. And I remember this particularly from the construct of trying to see whether or not I can get a result based on what I say and how I say it. So here it says communication skills are needed to speak appropriately with a wide variety of people. How you present your ideas. The biggest issue in leadership is this construct of how you present your ideas. If you're not able to communicate your ideas succinctly, well enough, then they're just not going to be met. Which means that the ordinary and the straightforward and the usual is not sufficient for leadership, particularly in the educator space, in order to get across. Things are changing, and they're changing all the time. So the language and the manner in which you communicate is essential. Affirmative movements and the ability to exchange through engagement. That's a skill. And if you don't know that skill, it's going to be very difficult for you to appreciate the impact it has when you don't do it. emotional intelligence and communication, who you are and what you say and what you do. And this is in leadership as essential across the board, regardless of where you are. Young people are watching us consistently to say, well, are you a reflection of what you say and what you do? Because there's a lot of people who miss the emotional intelligence element of it, of being able to understand that the distinction between what you say and what you do is critical to that process of leadership. Leadership is inspiration, and inspiration requires communication. It's not what you say, it's what you do, the impact of how you do it. I'm going to talk about inspiration on a consistent basis. And I talk about inspiration as one of the elements that I'm going to bring into this module, because inspiration is the first step before ambition. And ambition is the first step before motivation. You can't motivate anyone who's not inspired. It's a waste of time. They'll have a feel-good feeling for a week or two, and then they'll go back to normal. So what is inspiration, and how do you inspire people? And that's critical for leadership, and that's critical for educators in order to understand the implications of inspiration in terms of getting long-term outcomes from not just yourself, but those that you're working closely to. The other element that we talk about within the program is this thing called choice. That as human beings, we are the only people who have been given this. Well, some people may call it a curse, and some people may call it a blessing, but we are the only creatures that actually have the ability to choose. And choice is essential, because as leaders, it's important for us to understand that a lot of what our choices are going to be reflected in everything. They're going to be reflected in how we prepare, and they're certainly going to be reflected in how we communicate. So what are the choices that you're making in life? And understanding that you have to use choice as one of the ingredients in your life, because creatures work on instinct. Every other creature on this planet is instinctual by nature. They have no elements of choice. So the moment that you're not utilizing choice as one of your ingredients, you're actually you're not maximizing one of the key skills that you have. In leadership as overall, the context of who you are is very important. And the context of who you are in the greater part of others is also very important. So we always say here, each person has a light, be aware of the light amongst you and all the light that shines. In your collective, you have a light, but your light lights your individual path. Now, one of the key issues of motivation, particularly within all spaces, whether it be within the education space for individuals or whether it be in the corporate space for people who are working, is the inability to truly understand the direction that you are meant to be going in the context of the environment that you're in. So even if I'm an educator, or even if I'm working in an environment, I need to understand from my own personal point of view, where does my destiny lie? And how is it that what I'm doing here is taking me to my destiny? If I don't know that, I better create that. If I don't create it, then the whole element of my choosing my direction goes out the window. And as a consequence of that, my motivation is going to be seriously affected. So as leaders, we have to have this constant understanding and measuring of what direction are we taking, even though we're in a collective. And how are we going to make these choices? Well, a critical part of making these choices is creating guiding principles. Good, strong leaders have guiding principles. People who inspire have guiding principles. They are very strong, they are very innate, and they are very ingrained. And as you develop these guiding principles over time, or in some cases you already have them, all you need to do is bring them up to the surface, polish them, and apply them. Then you will find that they become very strong mitigating factors to things that can affect you. One, the environment, circumstances, and situation. If you have strong guiding principles about the direction that you've chosen, and whether it's COVID or whatever the case may be may come along, it is not going to derail you. But if you're not rooted in these guiding principles, then any wind that comes along is going to take you in a completely different direction. So in the program, we talk quite extensively about this, and we actually apply it over a period of time. Just remember that all these ones that I'm giving you, these core products, are examples, or these core modules are examples of what it is that we will be doing in the program. The other thing that we talk about in the program is digital skills. Now, if ever there was a period and a time in society where you have no option. This is not like the days when I was going from records to CDs and I insisted on hanging on to records, and then 10 years later managed to get onto CDs, and then straight after that they became iPods, and I didn't want an iPod, and straight after that we're now streaming. If you don't have the luxury of 5-10 years to catch up with the technology that's there. And one of the critical things about really understanding digital skills is because continuous learning, you know, the last time I saw anything academic was when I finished university. And I actually, for a large part of my career, have not really needed to do anything in terms of improve myself. Occasionally in a work environment, I'd be given courses and this, that to attend, but that was it. And I attended them and, you know, can't even remember what they were. But because the skilling element is going to be an essential ingredient in making decisions in the future, particularly educators, from a leadership perspective, are going to have to be continuously skilling, upskilling, reskilling, and learning some of the old stuff and learning new skills. I mean, I remember going to a school not too long ago, which was getting upgraded in terms of its technology in the classroom. And the elderly teachers were having a difficulty acclimatizing. My daughter's 6 years old. She's been doing online schooling from April. And the challenge that the teacher's having to just understand the difference between Zoom and Teams and this, that, and the other is affecting her learning. So the challenge of having to be ready for digital skills is essential. And this we talk about as one of the modules in the program. Time management. Now, when we have been routined, it's been easy. And by routined, I mean, classically, you get up at a particular time, you shower, you get into the car, you know you're in traffic for a particular period of time, you walk into a particular environment, where it be a classroom or a workplace, you start at a particular time, you finish at another particular time, off you go. I'm sure you're experiencing it, particularly in the educators field, that all of a sudden now you're doing evening classes, you're doing Zoom classes, you're doing this and that other classes. And if one doesn't have the ability to time manage themselves, this is going to be a very painful experience. And if there's one critical component that creates the level of rise in anxiety, it's the inability to manage your time. And there are different attributes to managing time. I've put here the priority matrix by Eisenhower, which is what are the things you do first, do next, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, this is a skill. It's not something that falls from heaven, hoping to understand that you'll get it by the next day. My eldest son, I'm always constantly pressuring him about making sure there's a correlation between his calendar, his diary, and the time that goes with those things. Because it's one thing to write something down and say, I'll do it. It's another thing for you to actually do it based on whether or not you've got sufficient time. So the program talks about this quite extensively, because I do think it's a core leadership component. And then one of the other elements that goes hand in hand with Dream the Plan, which is where you are actually visualizing. This is, again, for the core elements of motivation for a leader. If you're not motivated, anybody else around you is just going to feel that, see that, and sense that. But the core element about motivation for a leader is that leader to have a vision for themselves, a vision for their overall objectives. And once you have that vision, an ability to execute against that vision, to make sure that you're bringing that dream into actually action. So this is now planning the dream. So here we talk extensively linked to time management, this ability of saying, okay, if I've got this objective over the next 5 years of my life, how do I make that 5 years implementable tomorrow? So we go from objectives to goals to tasks. Objectives are yearly things. Vision may be 5 years. You take the 5 years, you break it down into years. You take the years, you break them down into months. Those are your goals. And you take your months, you break them down into days. Those are your tasks. And if you follow that principle from a written perspective, then it enables you to get to the end results. And again, a core skill that's needed, not just for yourself as a leader, educator, etc., but also something that you can pass on. The second last point is this thing about, is a module that we have in the program about keep on keeping on. Now, if there was ever, and I always thank my God for enabling me to have this principle from 10 years ago, I think almost now, actually, if not longer, which has held me steady during this COVID time. Now, one of the challenges about this COVID time is the inability to see opportunity in crisis. There's a great statement from Winston Churchill who says, don't waste a good crisis. And what's happening with people who are not seeing opportunity in a good crisis is because they're having the effect of the situation become greater than what it is that their vision, their plans, their hopes, their goals, their aspirations, and their choices have. So in this, we try to work on developing philosophies for individuals. If you don't have a philosophy, it's going to be a tough ride, because what we're going through now, and particularly as educators, is just chopping and changing and left and right and uncertainty. And you have to ride that tide of uncertainty. One of the philosophies I have here is life's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. I've had this for the last 10, 15 years. So whenever I see rain, crisis situation, I look for the dance. I look for what it is that there is opportunity in. Unfortunately, I've managed to find that even in this. Also, it talks about your philosophy in life and then your identity. So in leadership, strong identity is imperative. If you don't have strong identity, you're going to be swayed by peers, you're going to be swayed by all sorts of environments, situations, circumstances, etc. So we then try to spend time, lifting this component up and ensuring that people go out and actually start developing that. And that's what helps you keep on keeping on in times of difficulty. An overview there. The last one that I'm going to talk about here, obviously I had 12 earlier on. I think I've probably talked about 6 or 8, is this thing of defining your success. Everybody, it doesn't matter whether you're an educator at a school, a principal at a school, a leader in an organization, a CEO, an executive, everybody has to define their own personal success. It is essential that the success is not a consequence of unintentionality. You have to be very, very clear about what it is that you're looking for. And particularly as educators, first responders, people on the front line, leaders who are on the front line have to define their successes, usually in context to their environment. But it is important, even in context to environment, to say, okay, what is in this for me? And when you start saying what is in this for me, you have 2 components to look at. Usually the typical one is to look at the size, fortune, fame, accumulation, wealth factor. But I think there are other elements that everybody in leadership has had to start looking at, whether you're working or it doesn't matter what, position you're in, is to say, what is important to me? Is time important to me? It's interesting how so many people who are working at home with their family have now realized maybe family is not important to me. I want to go back to the office. But is time important to you? Is family important to you? How much pride do you take in your work? If you can start, as a leader, developing that as a core component of your definition of success, it changes your motivation. It changes your sense of perspective. Health. Is the fact of what I'm doing enabling me to sustain my health? Therefore, I'm successful in those ways. Independence, a level of time. If I'm not passionate, what am I passionate about? And then the other key element is for me, across the board of all leaders, is this element of integrity, this element of honesty, which we've lost in our country in more ways than one in every sector, whether it's politics or corporate or whatever the case may be. So that's really an overview of the program, particularly I know to Sis Jabu and to Smiso. And what we've then said is that the program, to get all that, kept it nice and cheap. We've worked it out at 400 rands per month. So at 400 rands a month, you receive all that. And it's a 1-year program that runs that runs effective from, I think the date is actually next Saturday. And what we'll do is we'll add one of those modules on, plus the guest speakers, plus the mogul classes and master classes that are running, that will hopefully enable particularly educators and leaders who leaders come out of that environment and just be able to see the world in a different perspective as they go back to the battlefields of educating and improving the lives of others. Is there anything else? Tommy, did I miss anything? That's it, really. That's the program. That's the whole sense of it. That's the whole And the idea, yes, is to try and bring, you know, folks onto the program to run with that. And then as we progress, we'll you know, everybody has, you know, access to modifying it, giving comments, changing it to suit the, you know, the perspective that they may think is important. One of the core components of this is to create a networking platform. I would like teachers and educators in London and teachers and educators in wherever, Ghana, teachers and educators wherever, to be part of this and to be having an overall leadership discussion around the future of education and teaching from a global perspective as well. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Smiso.
Sorry.
No problem.
It would be nice to get teachers from Finland, because Finland's education system is very highly recognized, and they have a really brilliant education system, and just the program in itself in education. It would be nice to engage with them as well. So yeah, so that, you know, another thing is that all of these components are aligned in having the ability to learn from other systems that are in place. You know, how can you use what other education systems use to fill in the gaps? And I think that's really, you know, in your education system. So if I find that the lack of resources is one of the biggest issues in our South African education system, what can I take from engaging with other educators globally, like the ideas to fill in that gap of the lack of resources in my country, in our education systems as in South Africa. So very interesting.
So I was watching an interesting YouTube or TED talk around the motivation of teachers, that motivation in the US for teachers had dropped quite considerably. I think close to 35%. I can't remember if it was US, Australia. And then my chief, they started introducing peer review. Now, peer review was the ability to have each teacher sit with another. So whenever there's a classroom teaching setup, you'd bring another teacher in from another classroom to sit and listen, and then start developing almost a support critique mechanism. And they actually did a study on the impact of that on the loneliness of teachers. So, you know, when you're in a classroom on your own and you're repetitive in that process, the fact that now you can have one, and then they increased it to 2 and 3 and started rescheduling the program, and found that not only was it highly productive for the educators themselves from a motivation point of view, but it was also highly productive from how the classroom was actually affected. So little things like that, Smee. So things that that, you know, people are doing in order to sustain themselves with different, you know, innovative ideas. I know that particularly with the classroom, it can be a very lonely place. Lonely and repetitive, you know. So every once in a while there needs to be breakout of getting people to remember the bigger picture of what it is that they're doing, and enabling them to see the significance and the impact that they're having, rather than the, you know, the continuous monotony of the same classes and students, etc. So what do you think? What do you think? What's your views on the program? What's your views on what we're doing?
I think it's brilliant. I love it. I think innovation has to be consistent, and motivation has to be consistent, especially given that educators have such a huge responsibility to motivate, to inspire, to evolve students that they teach. And so I think that this platform is the great opportunity to kind of develop those skills in order to be able to deliver from your end as an educator, to do what you are required to do. And I mean, a teacher, an educator, practitioner goes beyond their profession. You know, we are psychologists, we are admin clerks. So we are a lot of professions within just being an educator. And so, you know, we need this innovation, we need these skills in order to balance all of that in our teaching profession. And so I think this is a great platform. I'm so inspired, excited, and yeah, it's going on my calendar. It's
Fantastic.
going to be prioritized. Love it.
And I think just from the context of Principal Ntuli, because I, as a principal in a school, you know, and as the leader, the proverbial head of the school, you kind of want external other things that can happen that can support educators to keep them motivated. It also, you also have to be motivated, right? So you need to be able to step out and also have something that gives you a sense of you know, tomorrow's important, tomorrow's necessary, and tomorrow is going to be okay. So sometimes we forget that even as leaders need leaders to help them. And I'm hoping that this platform will be able to support everybody from principals, HODs, teachers, etc., and come out every time. It's not one of those where you have to, you know, take notes. And it's not a lecture. It's not anything. You come in, and we're doing it also on the value add side. You listen. We hope that it touches the spirit significantly. And if the spirit can be touched, because the moment you're inspired, your spirit's been touched. Right? The moment you're motivated, your cognitive is being touched. The cognitive gets tomorrow, the spirit sustains. So the moment we can, and that's why I talk about inspiration all the time. The moment we can do things and say things that inspire and give people that lift, then all's the better. And if there's a place that can come to at least 2-3 times a month to do that for an hour, this is going to be that platform.